All right, this is live. I don't have my lower thirds today, so I forgot to bring them. We're going to conduct our Break the Cage Saturday morning breakthrough hangout. That's what it is. I was going to say webinar, but it's not a webinar. It's a hangout from Langley, British Columbia. Now, there's a story about how I'm here and a bigger story about what's gone on since I got here. I'd like to welcome Kristen and Griswold, and Joy's coming here pretty quick. I invited a couple of others. I don't know if they'll be here or not, Manny and Christopher and some others. But anyway, we'll see who shows. That's fine. And I'm also going to post the link in, if I can, Joy's going to in the comment box. But anyway, so I'm here in Langley because my son's getting married. My son is getting married on Sunday. And it's an interesting opportunity. Weddings are always a really interesting opportunity to see people and see them in an interesting way and so forth. And so it's been kind of a funny, been kind of an interesting and fun experience the last couple of days, both getting here and getting ready to have the wedding. We had the rehearsal yesterday afternoon and the rehearsal wedding dinner last night, and it was all great and everything's wonderful. So I want to talk about something. The topic for today is the difference between can doing something and choosing to do it. And this came out of a conversation I had yesterday with some folks in the wedding party and about different struggles of people getting along. And there's always family dynamics that come into this kind of stuff when people get together that haven't seen each other for a long time or that have issues and relationship problems that have sort of manifested themselves over years. And so the question came up about whether or not someone has the ability to make changes. The whole I'm doing the best that I can argument or discussion, or maybe they're doing the best that they can, and they can't get past some previous hurt or ended relationship or family dynamic that has taken place in the past. So there was a long discussion about that, about whether or not someone can do something, and that migrated into a discussion about. You need to try. There you go. Perfect. Migrated into a discussion about someone taking the initiative and getting help to making some changes. So in the focus of Break the Cage, we're going to have a little bit of that discussion, and I'm going to be really interested in the points of view of all of you because all of you have some experience in this matter, some professionally and some just your own life. But let's review for a second the premise of Break the Cage. Break the Cage is a nod to the fact that we all live in a set of self-imposed boundaries. There are people around us who try to control us, either directly or indirectly, through their behavior, by withholding or giving things. And when we're little, we live in that world and we kind of don't have a lot of choices. As adults, we adopt a set of paradigms, a set of beliefs, a worldview, as it will, that often comes from that set of experiences, often comes from that externally imposed world. And then we're faced with a set of choices. And the set of choices are always to stay where we are or to break out of that circumstance, to break the cage, as it were, to create, to mold, to fashion a new life. And one of the fundamental premises for my coaching in Break the Cage in the 90-day Personal Reinvention Program is that there is an opportunity to craft a new life. Foundationally, there is an opportunity to make radical, immediate change, okay, that you can immediately decide to become a radical change candidate. I call them RCRs, a radical change, RSCCs, radical change candidate. So one of the things that I can't do because I didn't bring my lower third is show you where you can go to find out a little bit more information. But if you'd like to, for those that might be watching later, breakthecagenow.com, www.breakthecagenow.com is the place where I have just a little opt-in page and then an opportunity to get a hold of me to talk about this in detail for yourself as a personal matter, if that's something you'd like to do. But the foundation of all this is the opportunity exists for people to make radical personal change if you want to. So the way that this played out was there's some old relationship problems, and I don't want to get into details and drama, and I'm not going to do that. But the phrase in the discussion kept coming up, well, they did the best they could. And I'm not going to debate that, because one of the things that I talk about the past that locks people up is living in the past. So living, it's like driving in the rearview mirror. If I drive in the rearview mirror, two things are certain. One is I will crash. Two is even if I crash only a little bit, I will go slow. I cannot go quickly driving in the rearview mirror. Nothing can happen fast because I can't see, assimilate, and deal with stuff that's either present or coming at me, and I cannot see the opportunities of the future. The past, and this is one of those things that goes in the comment box, right? The past is only good for two things. Yesterday tells me two things and two things only. Number one, it tells me where I start today. I must start today where I am. There's a whole train wreck that happens in people when they try to start where they're not, right? You have to start where you are. So that's the first thing that yesterday does for me. It tells me where I start today. And the second thing that yesterday does for me, if I'm willing to learn, is it teaches me some lessons about what works and what doesn't work. Okay? So if I'm willing to learn lessons about what doesn't work, or what works and what doesn't work, then the past can be a great teacher. And other than teaching me some lessons about what works and what doesn't work and determining where I start today, the past doesn't give you much. Okay? And when we spend an excessive amount of time living there, or reminiscing about, lamenting over, or blaming for, or arguing about, what ends up really happening is we end up wasting a lot of the present in those arguments and discussions about things we cannot change. So my position on that is all these discussions took place between different parties, having to do with, that we're meeting up for the first time in years at this wedding rehearsal, and it all went very civilly. I mean, there were no outbreaks and no weird stuff, okay? But there was a lot of discussion about hurt feelings and old relationships and all that nonsense. And here's the thing. You can, if you choose, make radical personal change, and you can start today. Because no matter what else is true, the future is an unwritten page. The future is an unskied slope. It is fresh powder. Okay? You can decide that the future is already determined based on what happened in the past, and I'm just going to ski down in the same track I always did. I'm going to behave the way I always behave. I'm going to argue the same way I argued. I'm going to take the same positions I always took. You can imagine that in your mind and therefore create that reality going forward. Okay? But it doesn't have to be. The true fact is the future is the undiscovered country. The future is an unskied slope. It is an unwritten page. And if you choose to take both responsibility and accountability, and quite frankly, in my universe, the joy of the truth of the unwritten nature of the future, you can start today and create a future that is wildly and radically different than the past. Now, there's another piece that I want to go on to about that, which is our own abilities versus getting help in making those changes. But before I do that, I want to ask those that are here in our group, either Griswold or Joy or Kristen or Manny, if you have any comments, reactions, or observations to the first part of the discussion, or personal anecdotes or stories that might relate to or further enlighten us on those truths.
I've got one, and you and I have been working on de-jargoning my way of thinking. So in the background, I've still got a little neurosis where I dig up the studies for everything, and this has to do with last night I found the study about some stuff that you mentioned on Break the Cage a few weeks ago. So I just wanted to share the study. because I want to geek and then I'll go back to unjargoning. Um,
We can deal with the geek. Go ahead, buddy.
there are 3 ways of coping, and I pulled this up. One is emotional coping, where you sit there and you rev in the emotions of something. The other is avoidance coping, where you don't think about it or do anything about it. And the third is task-based coping. So each of those 3 ways fires your neural networks off in a different way. A different system is kicking in. So I tend to go look up the studies behind the stuff you say, just so that I can help my neurotic soul feel better. So I just wanted to share that with you. So it made me smile.
Well, thank you very much, and the geekdom is appreciated. I'm actually a geek, a monster deep geek in some areas, not in the areas you are, but in some areas that I would actually. I'm going to take a little digression and tell a funny story. In my old world, I was a world-renowned competitive market design expert, and I spoke at Harvard and at Stanford and University of Alberta and some different places in that context, and spent a lot of my life in front of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and testified in front of Congress and a bunch of other places, right? So I understand what you're talking about, and I've lived in that world. So yeah, a couple of days ago, I was at a client here in Edmonton, and we were talking about his business, and his business happens to be, now get this, his business happens to be in energy, in the kind of stuff that I did before. He's a guy I've known now for 10 years because of that. So we were doing coaching about getting his business up and running, and he's being very successful, and he's really excited, and it's going really well. At the end of the talk, at the end of his coaching session, he had a visitor come who was the Dean of Alternative Energy at the University of Calgary. So the Dean of Alternative Energy at the University of Calgary showed up, and he walked in all his deandom, right, and deanness, and I see Manny grinning because he gets that. Okay, so he walked in all of his deandom, and he wanted to know, he's talking to Dave, and Dave introduced me as a business coach and everything else, and so the guy started being his Dean of Energy kind of stuff, and Dave turned and looked at him and said, wait a minute. He said, this guy is the principal architect of the Alberta electric system and a few other things. And so there was a little crack in the deandom, and then he launched into some stuff. And so I just, without doing anything funny, I just started talking to him and told him about this and this and this and all the different things related to it. And all of a sudden, this whole icicle melted, right? I mean, like into a puddle on the floor in maybe 45 seconds, and it was actually kind of funny. So I get to geek him, all right? I geeked him till he could not carry the geek around. The weight of the geek was massive, so that was pretty
Thank you.
I actually thought of you, so it was an honor of you that I geeked him right to death.
You geeked full circle.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the conversation that went on between the dean and my client, Dave, afterwards was a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's funny. I really appreciate you bringing this up, the emotional and avoidance and task-based coping. Emotional is what you said. I love it. So I appreciate you bringing these studies and these points up, because it's an easy way actually to think about it. I mean, task-based is I go do some crap to keep busy. Avoidance is I go distract myself, or I don't think about it on purpose. And emotional is I think about it, I stew in it, and I try to do something about it with this emotional thing. And it's easy to see how we would feel differently, and you talked about neurons firing. In D-Geek, that means I just feel differently internally and react differently depending on which of those 3 things I do. I'm able to cope differently. It creates a different space and opportunity in myself, and one or another of those might be appropriate at different times for the same person or the same situation based on what you have and the tool set you have. So this moves right in perfectly to the next section, but before I do, I want to find out if any of the other guys had anything to say.
I wanted to know if I'm encapsulating this right, and it seems to me that every day you make the decision whether or not you bring yesterday's cage with you.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Every day you make a decision whether or not you bring yesterday's cage with you, because if you bring too much of yesterday forward, then you live in that cage, and you have to spend all day today either in it or breaking out of it, when what you could have done is leave the baggage behind. So that is a good way to think of it. Thank you. And I'm not going to pretend for 1 second that it's easy to learn to leave yesterday's cage behind. or that it's easy to recognize when you're inappropriately using task-based, avoidance-based, or emotional coping mechanisms, perhaps inappropriately, in ways that get in the way of your progress. And that'll move right into the second part of what we want to talk about. So I'm not claiming that it's easy. If it were easy, we wouldn't need coaches, we wouldn't need programs, we wouldn't need rehab, we wouldn't need lots of the tools that we've built to give people support and strength to cope, to change, and to break out of cages. Okay, my whole practice in Break the Cage is built around giving people the tools and the power, principally in their minds, and secondarily, some other kinds of tools, but principally in their heads, to continue to break the cage, to make choices about not bringing yesterday's baggage or cage forward. So let's move to part 2. Oh, Kristen, are you waving? No. Are you scratching your head? Okay. I can see the small picture. I couldn't tell if you were waving, wanting to talk. If you want to talk, just unmute.
Okay, I unmuted. I'm guilty of all this, so I'm just here soaking it in.
Okay, that's great. If you guys want to talk, just unmute and just go ahead and talk. So let's move into the next piece. We've established that there are multiple methods of coping. Grizz has encapsulated it well about having a choice about bringing yesterday's cage forward, and those are great things. So the first principle today is you do have that choice. Okay? You have that choice. Now, your choice mechanism may be busted. Your choice ability may be underused. You may not have practiced that much, and it might be rusty, and that might be like me trying to play some classical, complicated thing after I haven't touched it for a year. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. I'm going to dork stuff up, and I'm going to have to go back and work out some rusty spots, and all that kind of stuff. That's all true, but you still have a choice. And if you foundationally go to the place where you say, I have no choice, I must XYZ, I don't really care what XYZ is, then we have a whole different conversation, because then what you're doing is you're abdicating choice, you're giving it away, and you're claiming that the constraints, or their emotional or psychological constraints behind you, have somehow bound your future actions and feelings, which is not true foundationally. But it is true that our mechanism to use them may be busted, it may be rusty, and it may be out of practice. Okay, so let's talk about that for the second part of, our Break the Cage thing this morning. And that is, when you find yourself busted, when you find yourself at a place where your choice mechanism isn't working very well, then you have another choice. And the choice is to try to do it alone or to get help. Now, doing it alone, I'm using that as a euphemism, large scale, for either abandoning hope, pretending that you can't do it, pretending that you're not a radical change candidate and that somehow you are different and that you are somehow constrained like no other human being has ever been constrained in your ability to go forward. That is abandoning the most precious gift which you have, which is agency, your ability to direct your attention and set an intention. Those are inviolate things that you have. You have the ability to set an intention, to direct your attention, and to exercise agency. And you have that even if you're tied up in chains, because how you choose to feel and interpret the circumstance is in your hands. All right, so you can choose to do things alone, or you can choose to get help. The more busted, rusty, or worn out your choice mechanism is, the more you're likely, if you do it alone, to do nothing. The more you're likely to stew around, repeat yesterday, live the same day, Groundhog Day, the same day over and over again, have 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 10 years of your life go by, find that you're in the same relationships, even if the names have changed, that you're in the same relationships, doing the same dumb things, having the same reactions, even if the city has changed, the scenery has changed, the people have changed, you haven't changed, right? And all of those things you brought with you. So if you try to make radical change yourself, it's very difficult, and it is practically impossible if your change mechanism or choice mechanism is either busted, rusty, or you're way out of practice. And you're really good in practice in making excuses and blaming others and looking for reasons not to. I call those listing the reasons you don't instead of finding the ways that you can. Okay, I did a whole LA Talk radio show on reasons versus ways. You find the reasons you can't do something versus the ways to get it done. A loser does the best they can and finds all the reasons why that was all that they could do. A winner does whatever it takes and simply finds ways to make things happen. Okay, now that's a bit of an overgeneralization, but if you look at people that are successful, you'll find that it's true. So let's go to the other side, which is not doing it alone. Instead, exercising that precious gift of agency to make a choice, to get some help. So the first fundamental thing is do it alone, which is usually a mistake, particularly if your choice mechanism's busted or rusty or whatever. And the other is get some help. So let's talk about what getting help looks like. There's real obvious circumstances. Somebody that's got a drug problem goes to rehab. And so we're not talking about, I have clients that need that issue, and we've done all that. So it's not that I don't have experience there, but that's not usually the choices. Usually the choices are much more subtle, and they're smaller than that. They start with, what am I going to do today? What choices and actions am I going to do today that move me in the direction of my dream, my goal, the vision that I hold about who I could be? And the reason I take it right down to the day is because the day is all you have. You don't have next week. You can set a 90-day and 120 and 180-day goals, and we do plenty of that in Break the Cage and change programs. But it all comes back to what you choose to do today. And even smaller than that in this moment, like today, right now, the people that are on have chosen to watch. The people that watch later are choosing to watch. What you do after that is the key. You can either explain to yourself why all the things we talked about today don't matter, didn't work, or don't apply to you, or you can simply say, you know what, today, with this information, with this encouragement, I'm going to make one change. I'm going to do one thing different, one new thing. I'm going to exercise my agency, make a choice to do one new thing. Okay? Now we're on this side over here, which is where I put the help. Help can come in a number of ways. It can come in a very small way from yourself, where you simply say, you know what, I choose to make a choice. I choose to make a change. I choose to do one small thing. I can't do it all, and that's so big it's overwhelming, it blows me away. But I choose not to engage in this kind of conversation. I choose not to allow myself to get sucked into this argument. I choose to take a walk instead of participate in this emotionally damaging situation. I choose to, speak kindly to someone who flipped me off on the road in my mind. I choose to make one small change. So in that way, you can make conscious choices. In a larger sense, help can come from a decision to enlist someone. It can be a family member. It can be a friend. You can go somewhere and say, you know what, I've made a decision. I've made a decision to do some things differently. I don't really know how I'm going to do them yet, and I know that I've decided this stuff in the past and haven't been very successful, but I'd like to enlist your help. And you can start with something very small. I wouldn't go to a friend and say, you know, I decided next week to make $1 million, change my life, clean up everything, and get it all squared away by the end of next Friday. Can you help me out? Probably not a recipe for massive success. Okay, but enlisting help from someone close to you, a friend, a family member, someone that cares about you, is one way to do it. Obviously, the most effective, most immediate, and most powerful way to do it is someone who has your absolute best interest at heart. It can be a coach. If it's serious, it can be a professional, like you got to go to a shrink, if that's an issue that is really needs that kind of medical and other kinds of attention. But quite often, between those that love you or care about your progress, and if you don't have any of those in your life, and some of us don't, then you got to make a choice to make an investment in yourself to get some help, a coach, for example. So my experience is just like Michael Phelps getting 22 gold medals, just like the ice skaters and the gymnasts that we see performing astounding things at the Olympics, just like all of those kinds of people who have successfully competed, whether it's music, drama, dance, art, sports at the highest level, they all absolutely take, live with, listen to, and follow religiously the demands of someone who holds them in a higher place than they do, who sees them at a greater level of performance than they can presently see for themselves. We call that general category of people coaches. So I have coaches. I am a huge fan of that, and that is the easiest and fastest way to make that kind of change. It is not the only way. I'm not saying it's the only way, but it is the fastest way. Now, the key piece here is making the choice to get help, making the choice to say, you know what, I have failed numerous times on my own to lose weight, change my situation, improve my skills, improve my job, make more money, get out of this relationship, get in this relationship, whatever the list of things is. I've already tried that a pile of times. In fact, so much so that I hate myself. I don't believe I can do it. My self-esteem sucks, and I'm laying down on the ground giving up already. The choice today is to stay there another day, another week, or to get up and get some help. So the next step in breaking the cage, and the last one we're going to talk about today, is choosing to make the leap to getting help to breaking the cage and exercising fully your right to choose. Okay, now I'm going to open it up again. Comments, questions, and thoughts from your own experience and other things that you might want to add to the discussion. I see we've lost a couple folks. Joy dropped out. I think she's having trouble getting on the
I'm here.
Wi-Fi.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I don't see her in the film strip. She just told me she's here. But anyway, open up. Manny, Griswold, you guys have stuff to say?
It all makes sense to me, and that's a good feeling for me. I like things that make sense. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that it makes sense. I feel good. I made sense. You know, I always have a worry that maybe I don't make sense. But I'm waiting for the mic. It's a complicated thing having both of us in the same hotel room. It's a great big hotel room, but even still, I got a loud mouth, and so I speak, and if her mic's on, even if she's on the other side of the Mount Everest, why it doesn't matter, it comes in that mic. Well, thank you. We have Manny's endorsement of what we're saying today makes sense, so I appreciate that. Other folks that want to comment. Griswold, you got something for us?
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking about how well you can go to friends and all that. They're also dealing with their own stuff. And so that the benefit of a coaching relationship is that you predefine what the relationship is, and that's what they're going to be there for you for. They're not there to help you with anything else, and you don't have to help them with anything else. It's a dedicated relationship to your self-improvement.
That is exactly right, and that's the reason that it's fastest and best and most effective, because your friends know you in a different context, and they might undermine you accidentally by saying, yeah, you've tried this before. And just have that whole dynamic of feeling, and your point is great, which is they got their own pile of crap to deal with. When you get a coach, they're not interested in any of the excuses, and they don't carry all this baggage with you. You have come, you have said you want to change. They take that at face value and said, great, this is what we're going to do. Here's the do what by when. And those of you that were on my Results on a Rampage know about do what by when. So here's the do what by when, and this is the steps we need to do it, and let's get it done. And if there's a breakdown and there's excuses and things, and okay, you deal with those, particularly when you're making changes, emotional changes, instead of like trying to clear a high jump or something like that. But absolutely, it is a dedicated relationship. It is predefined. It brings no baggage, and it is focused clearly on improving the thing or things that you define. And as a coach, I can tell you that often peripheral crap comes in. So, for example, in Speed to Profit marketing, when I'm trying to teach somebody how to do marketing online and create video presence, I often have to deal with the whole baggage of self-esteem and a bunch of other issues because they either are afraid to be on camera, they don't like their presence, they don't know how to project or stand in power. So we have to sort of take a detour over here and deal with some things in order to get the marketing aspect squared away. So there's sometimes relationships, but you're exactly right, and I love that observation. Anybody else? No. Okay, great. So thank you all for being here and discussing this today. So I'm going to recap here for just a minute. Break the cage. This whole series, and I'm sorry I didn't bring my cute lower third. I'll have that back next week with a little cagey thing, right? Break the Cage is about giving you, who watch this television show week after week, the tools, the encouragement, and the power. The tools, the encouragement, and the power to do the things you don't believe you can do, with tools that you may not know you have and power you don't know you control, to make the significant changes, improvements, and growth in your life that you want to. Today we talked about a couple things. We talked about yesterday being good only for two things: defining where you start today and learning lessons of what did and didn't work from yesterday. Then we talked about getting help, about making the choice to enroll help. Actually, over here we also talked about first being aware of the realization that you can change, that your future is in your hands, not somebody else's, that the future is the undiscovered country. I keep doing this because I think of skiing on virgin snow. I've done that a few times. My favorite is Granite Chief at Squaw Valley in Lake Tahoe, which is a single black. It's not a double black, but it's a single black run, and it's beautiful. It's way in the back of Squaw Valley, and it's just spectacular. And when it's fresh and virgin after a night of snow, it's just like a glory hallelujah run, and you can do it half a dozen or 10 times without even any hesitation at all, because it's just this exhilarating, empty, and it runs quite often empty because it's way in the back and nobody goes there. And I love it. So that's my, it's virgin snow, beautiful place to go. That's the first thing, is to understand that that's your choice. And the second thing is to then accept that and get the help you need to make the radical changes that can create for you a beautiful, powerful, and radically different future. So the Break the Cage motto is going to be: do things you don't believe you can do with tools you don't know you have and power you don't know you control, and to make those things real as you break the cage every day. Don't bring yesterday's cage forward, and make those powerful changes in your life. I see we've been joined right here at the end by Dr. CV from Timbuktu. Dr. V, are you with us, or are you just represented by avatar?
I'm represented by an avatar.
All right, avatar representation. We were just closing out.
It's relatively natural.
Oh, it's relatively natural. In fact, the avatar, it's like what you see is what you get. It's a WYSIWYG avatar. All right. Well, we're done. So today's broadcast has been very good. I appreciate the participation of everyone that has joined us today and all of the great comments we've got. Please leave your questions and stuff in the comment box below on the event page, and I will be happy to go through it later today or tomorrow. I've got a wedding tomorrow and some stuff today, but I'll get to it. We'll answer more questions, and then we'll continue the dialogue next week on the next episode of Break the Cage. Bye-bye.